Hey everybody, welcome to today's Cathedra webinar. We are coming to you live on November 25th, 2025. If anybody is an NLC webinar first timer in the room, know that our Cathedra webinars get their name from the Creek word for learning. And today you're going to be learning about restoring balance, self-care for native serving professionals from your instructor, Linnell Smith. All right, guys, I got a mute on here. Here we go. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center. We're so thrilled that you could tune in for today's webinar. And I want to commend all of you for coming in on a holiday week. That's really amazing to come in here to help learn to take better care of yourself. You can follow along while I read the disclaimer aloud. This webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. We also have our copyright infringement law printed here. This is just a friendly reminder that the webinar materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. If you wish to access the recording of today's webinar or see the PDF of the slides moving forward, you can always find that in the courses section. I encourage you to look through all the courses we have available on the learning platform. And then there is also a link to today's presentation slides for you in the chat, as well as in the shared notes section. And should you join us for a future webinar, you'll just log in like you did today and click on that green banner at the top of the screen to join. We do ask that you join with listen-only capabilities. We are recording and it helps to cut down on audio feedback for the recording as well as the instructor. And if you find that the sound is coming out of the wrong device, maybe you're trying to use your headphones, maybe you have a Bluetooth speaker, whatever the case might be. If you come down to the bottom of your screen, you might have a headset icon where I have a telephone. But if you click on that, it'll bring up a list of your speaker devices and you can pick the right output. Even though we do want you to join on mute so that we can protect the recording, we do still want to have class participation. You know, we want to hear your comments. We want to hear your questions. If you have any tech support issues that I can help you navigate through, I would love to know that as well. So we'll primarily rely on the public chat for that. So if you don't yet have it open on your end, you can go over to the messages panel and public chat is right there at the top of the screen. You'll click on that and you'll see a chat between you and the rest of the webinar group. That's where you'll see my welcome message. That's where a link to the slides is posted. And if you want to join in the conversation, you'll just come down here to where it says send message in public chat, type what you'd like to say or ask, and then you can either hit enter or you could click on the cute little paper airplane button and that'll send it in where we all can see it. If you go to the shared notes, you can open that by clicking right below public chat. I do have a long list of helpful links for you in there. We have a link to today's webinar feedback survey, a link to today's presentation slides, a link to join our email blasts so that you'll always know when our webinars are happening, a link that you can bookmark so that you can log in easier in the future. We have all kinds of good stuff in there. And then if you ask something or maybe make a comment and you're concerned that we missed you along the way, you could always alert me to it by using that little hand raise feature that's all the way at the bottom right of your screen. Yeah, they are, or at least most of them are. We don't really include the webinar feedback survey later on because we do the report and send it off rather quickly after the webinar, but that's a great question. We would love though if you took a moment to introduce yourselves in the chat now. You can let us know your name, where you're tuning in from. It's always fun to see all the different tribal nations that are represented, your work or your role in Indian country, and your tribal affiliation. If you have one, you might be a tribal employee and you don't have your own affiliation, and that's okay too. All are welcome. And then just a quick final note while you all are introducing yourselves in the chat. Try your best to avoid clicking on that red menu panel that's to the far left of your screen. You might just have icons if you didn't expand it all the way. But I just want to give you a heads up because if you click on it, it doesn't do like an are you sure you want to leave the webinar message or anything like that. If you click on it, it will just pull you out of the webinar and take you to whatever you selected on the menu. You can always just rejoin the webinar by clicking on that green banner once again at the top of the screen. But I just want to give you a note because it can be kind of jarring if you click on it and you're immediately moved. All right, folks, while you're taking some time to introduce yourselves in the chat, it is with great pleasure that I introduce today's webinar instructor, Linnell Smith. And Linnell, I have made you presenter now. guys, go ahead and just keep introducing yourselves in the chat. We're just dealing with a technical difficulty really quickly, but the webinar will begin shortly.
Hey, Brooke.
Yes. Okay, perfect. I can hear you.
Hey folks, if any of you can't hear anything yet, the webinar hasn't quite started. We're just dealing with a technical difficulty, but we will get started in just a few moments. Thank you so much for your patience.
Okay.
Okay, doing a quick sound test. Are you able to hear me?
Testing. All righty, folks. I hope you can hear me. I was having some major tech issues here. Unfortunately, I could not hear the audio coming in, but apparently y'all can hear me. So I think that's the biggest part of the battle. So I will go ahead and get started. Sorry, we had to eat up a little bit of time, but I feel like the Thanksgiving tech gods, I didn't pay homage to them, so maybe that was part of the issue. So we're gonna jump into talking about today's content, which is restoring balance, self-care for professionals serving Indian country. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of open up with was that my background and my work has been exclusively, primarily, probably like 95% in Indian country in different capacities and in different areas. And so just knowing the community that I grew up in, and then knowing the communities that I'm serving, like sometimes this can be very, very tiresome work, right? There's a lot of emotional ties to much of the work that we're doing, whether it's showing up in our day-to-day, in our offices, or with our employees, or even with our families. I feel like a lot of this just kind of blends over into our personal lives as well as our professional lives. And so we want to show up at our best as much as possible. It's unrealistic to think that we're going to be 100% all the time, but when we can recognize the signs of, yeah, I'm feeling a little run down, I'm feeling a little drained in the work I'm doing, and we're going to talk about that. So I'm excited that you're here. This can be a pretty busy week. We're on the front end of Thanksgiving in whatever way you celebrate, whether it's just having friends and family come together, share a meal, or maybe you host, you do all kinds of stuff. Maybe you're a shopper and you're going to fight the crowds this weekend to get some good deals. Whatever that is, it tends to be a pretty busy week. So I'm glad to see that many of you have shown up for this session. I feel like it's good timing to kind of remember that we need to take care of ourselves. But I also want to give you a little bit of background to who I am. My name is Linnell Smith, and I am Dinesh, born and raised on the Navajo Nation. I grew up on the New Mexico side of the res, but I raised my family on the Arizona side of the res. So I'm very familiar with my community, and I loved growing up on the res. True blue, through and through, res girl. I wear that badge with honor. And I had the fortunate opportunity to really get to work in my community, but also as a consultant, I get to work in many tribal communities. And so there are a lot of similarities in community, but also there's those little subtle nuances that make our tribes very distinct. And so I love learning about that and kind of navigating all of these different types of tribal communities. I've been working for about, my career spans maybe about 28, 29 years. And I started out working for a Native CDFI, so a community development financial institution. And I was able to run a Native nonprofit there, my CDFI, and we really focused in on homeownership opportunities, bringing mortgage opportunities to tribal members that wanted to build, buy, or renovate a home. And so we built in building the homeowner by like teaching them about budgeting, financial education, what's an asset, setting up down payment reserves for homeownership, and then stayed there for about 14 years. And then I moved into my first consulting business. And so I did a lot of what I was doing with the old CDFI, and I took that into my consulting work. And I did that for about 2 to 3 years. And then I worked for Awista Corporation, which is a national Native CDFI, and they're an intermediary. So I worked with them for almost 10 years, which was so fun and so fulfilling that I got to do a lot of facilitation trainings, financial capabilities work, capacity building. So I did exclusively work in tribal communities as well. And so I left that organization a little over a year ago and launched my new business. And this business, it was so thoughtful and so meaningful as I was going into it that I really wanted to focus on passion projects. So you'll see a lot of like trauma awareness, trauma-informed practices built into a lot of the work that I do. I do a lot of coaching, executive coaching, group coaching. So really building and focusing on individuals within organizations, organizational diagnostics, strategic planning, lots of good stuff like that, team development. And so those are my kind of passion areas that I really wanted to lead my consulting work. And so I really like to incorporate that into everything we do, because I feel like we definitely have to focus on ourselves a lot of times in order for us to continue to do that amazing work as we're moving forward. And so that's a little bit about me. I'm zooming in or remoting in from the Navajo Nation. I'm actually visiting my mom right now. So I'm in Sawmill, Arizona. You might not even know where that is, but it's atop a little summit. And so I'm here for a couple of days. And then I actually live in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, which is just a little city outside of Albuquerque. So that's where I call home. So I'm like close enough to dash on home to spend some time with mom, and then but I'm also able to work from home as well a majority of the time. Okay, so let's go ahead and thank you for those that introduced yourselves in the chat. It's wonderful. I do recognize many of you, and it's good to see some new folks are in the this space as well. And so we're going to go ahead and start jumping into content here. So I want to focus in on what we're going to be spending our time together. And so today's session is really going to explore three main areas in our time in this webinar. So one is we're going to understand the emotional toll of working in tribal communities. And really kind of honing in on the heart of that work, right? And it really stretches us beyond our limits at times. And so we want to be aware of that, recognize it, and how do we apply number two, which is that the practical self-care strategies. And so we're going to look at what actually fits into our demanding schedules, because remember, work is work, but we also have our personal lives, our family life, everything that's involved around that, and they tend to occupy like a majority of our time. So we want to be mindful of that. And then our third learning objective is really leaning into some of those Indigenous centered wellness practices, and that can look very different for us, whatever feels comforting and something we can lean into. And we really want to just have at the center honoring that balance across our mind, body, spirit, and that emotional side. And so some of these practices will help us reconnect to that and give us that groundedness and that centeredness, right? And so as I read through and kind of gave a little bit of context to the learning objectives, I'm curious to hear from you, and we can use the chat. Just do a quick check-in with yourself as you're reading through this, and what feels most important to you right now. So is it the emotional understanding? Is it the practical strategies? Or is it reconnecting with spiritual or cultural ways of balance? So kind of just take a moment to kind of feel inwardly and what makes the most sense that you want to have a takeaway from the three learning objectives today. And if you can drop that in the chat, that'll give me a good little visual as to like what you're thinking about. Practical strategies, practical self-care. That's definitely an important piece, right? So go ahead and type in what you're wanting to take away from today out of the three. And I see people typing, so I'm going to give a few more seconds for folks to go ahead and get that dropped into the chat. Staying creative and in tune with different parts of me while balancing 9-to-5 work. Yeah. Prioritizing self before work, tools and ideas. Definitely, Fern. Practical self-care. Yeah, so it looks like the majority of the responses coming in is really looking at the strategy aspect, right? And I feel like when we are in work mode or parenting or being a caregiver, a lot of our energy goes there, right? And it's hard to like give time back to ourselves, right? To kind of recharge, but it's so, so important. It's definitely important. So thank you so much for those that have dropped into the chat, like sharing your intentions for today. So we're going to keep all of that in mind, and as we're moving through today's session, right? Okay, and then so before that, so part of this practical application of strategy is one, taking a moment to ground ourselves in today's content. And like I said, it's a busy week for many of us. Maybe we're thinking like, oh my gosh, I have so much work before I go on our break for the week, and I have to still go get some groceries because I'm hosting. So I have to get things prepared. Maybe it's preparing in advance some food. Maybe it's getting everything ready for family to come in, right? So there's a lot, like personally, but a lot work-wise as well. And so a really good practice and a strategy for organizations and for you yourself is to take an opportunity to just pause and ground so that we can prepare ourselves for whether it's meetings, for today's training, for just getting started for the day. And so this is going to be an intentional practice for us to do right now, and you can take it forward and modify it, use it whenever you need. And I like this deep breath strategy because it helps us calm that nervous system. It helps us give us time to collect our thoughts and really focus in on what we want to do. And so this is a really easy way, and you can do this anywhere. You can do it in the car, you can do it sitting at your desk, and we can do it right now. So one of the things, and you can modify it and do a box breathing. And this is super simple right now. And we're just going to take some really deep breaths. So what I want you to do is kind of get comfy in your seat where you're seated. Get your feet both planted on the ground. Get your arms and your hands in a relaxed space. And you can close your eyes or just have a soft gaze. And what I want you to do is take a really deep breath in. And we're going to breathe in for seconds. And I want you to feel and be intentional in really having that deep belly breath. So your tummy is going to extend out a little bit. So we're going to take one deep breath in for 4 counts. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then exhale that same breath for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. And be intentional about focusing in on our time together. So breathe 4, inhale 2, 3, 4, big exhale 2, 3, 4. And we'll do one last one. Breathe in for 4, inhale 2, 3, 4, exhale 2, 3, 4. And this gives you a really good opportunity to just get grounded, organize the thoughts, maybe set them aside for a moment so that we can arrive grounded. And this can be a helpful practice to just bring awareness to whatever's going on in your mind, your body. And it brings us to that grounded, rooted space of what we want to be intentional about today. Okay. Awesome. So type in the chat, how did that feel? And and maybe it felt a little awkward or like, I'm glad my camera wasn't on kind of thing, right? So how did that feel? What came up for you in that little breath work and grounded practice? And you can type that in the chat just to see what that was like for you. Calming, right? And it does, it's an actual thing, right? There's science behind it to give us a moment to pause, get ourselves grounded. So it brings on a sense of calmness. It can bring on a relaxed state. Maybe it's calming the mind that everything be okay. And it felt good to stop and take a real breath, nice and relaxing, definitely. And this is a really easy self-care strategy, right? And so this is our first takeaway. One thing that whenever we feel that busyness coming up, or maybe it's the chaos of the day or the week, lots on our mind, we have all these thought bubbles popping up, we can do just that intentional breath work. And so thank you for doing that. And thank you for jumping into the chat and sharing what came up for you in that. And so with this, so setting We're going to go into this next slide, setting intention. What does balance mean to you? So now that we're grounded and we've arrived in presence, we're going to set our intentions together. So I want you to take a moment to think about the word balance. So what does balance mean to you? Balance in your work, balance in your relationship, balance in your spiritual sense, right? So think about that. So for some, maybe balance means rest, right? Or for others, it might mean, hey, having clear boundaries. Maybe balance is time with family, or just having those moments to reconnect with what's around me. Maybe it's nature. Maybe it's even getting our feet to the ground, right? And having that type of groundedness. So with that, there's really no right or wrong answer to what balance looks like for us, because it's going to be different for each of us. And it can even shift from day to day, right? So when we think about that, like we might identify what balance is right in this moment. Maybe I feel a little more balanced after that breath work, but tomorrow, maybe it's going to be a different way of finding that balance, right? Because tomorrow's Thursday, it's a new day. Maybe I have new tasks and new things coming up for me. So I want to invite you to just type one word or one short phrase into the chat that captures what balance means to you right now. I'm just curious about that, right? And then take a moment to like look at whatever's popping into the chat, what others are saying, and then see if you notice anything. So type in the chat what balance means to you right now. And I'll just share mine. I was having a conversation earlier, a couple hours ago, and I was reminded of self-compassion, because sometimes I feel guilty taking time for myself when it comes to taking care of my mom, right? And I'm very aware of like her needs, and I'm one of her caretakers. So I spend a lot of time in that space. And when I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm tired, immediately guilt comes in, like, Linnell, you're in health, you're in good shape. Like, don't bring those thoughts in. But I have to remember that I'm still human, right? I still have all of these emotions, and my body can only handle so much as far as like stress and anxiety and things like that. So it's okay, right? So I have to find self-compassion for myself, and then that creates a balance, right? And so like we have lightness coming in that maybe is representative of balance. Life or living outside of work, feeling proud of myself in all aspects of your life, stability, no stress. Oh, wouldn't that be ideal? A feeling of content, not being like there all the time, right? Being steady, giving myself grace, balance, manageable time, self-care, prioritize life before work, right? Staying organized and stress-free. For sure. Yes. And I love how, like in our little bubble here that we've created with us in this session, there's a lot of similarities and needs are coming up, right? Even though we come from different roles, different places. And I love seeing these words because they remind us that balance isn't something we find one time. It's something we keep tending to, right? Because like right now, I may feel a little balanced after like this session, but what does it look like tomorrow? And how do I grab that again to create some balance in my life? So we're always going to be working towards it. And remember, this is going to be a practice that we have to put in place so that we get better at it, right? And it may be foreign right now. It may be something that I really haven't given much time or attention to. So it's going to have to be very intentional to carve out what balance looks like and how do I apply it, right? And so just with these words that you typed in, take it as a seed of intention moving forward, right? And so you're putting it out there in the universe to make this happen, right? And Brooke, I wanted to ask, do people have, oh, never mind. I won't hear you. I wanted people to unmute and actually share out, but I won't be able to hear you, unfortunately. So we'll have to exclusively use the chat for me. So I appreciate that. Okay. So with that, thank you for adding to the chat on what balance means to you, and just keep it at the front for today, right? And I challenge you to keep it at the front for the remainder of the week, which is a very busy week for most of us, right? And so this slide here, now that we've kind of talked about balance, it's important to understand what pulls us out of it, right? What pulls us out of balance? Maybe it's that burnout and compassion fatigue. And so for those of us serving tribal communities, our work is very deeply personal, because this is where I love working in tribal communities, because this is where we see like folks that are passionate about the work that they're doing, making a difference, making a change, supporting our community, making our community look a little different. Maybe it's the vision we have, right? And whether that's a personal mantra or it's an organizational goal moving forward, maybe that's the mission of the organization. So we put a lot into our communities. And so when we're constantly giving, like from the heart, being empathetic, sympathetic, compassionate with our clients, our families, our communities, we often do it with limited resources, but with high expectations, right? And so that operate in that space for periods of time, it can lead to emotional exhaustion. And so this is what's called passion fatigue. Compassion fatigue. So this is the cost of caring so deeply for others that our own energy starts to fade. How many of you all can relate to that definition? Whether you knew what compassion fatigue was, whether you have heard it before or not, how many can relate to the definition of compassion fatigue? And just type yes or no in the chat. A little, maybe, somewhat. So like compassion fatigue, the cost of caring so deeply for others that our own energy starts to fade. And Shelley's the first one in. Yes, right? So many of us can relate to this description. And it may be within work, and it may be within our personal lives. Maybe it's both. I have so many instances where I feel like that's been the case, and I've had compassion fatigue in many, many ways. So it's like, wow, I can definitely relate to this. And then so with that, we want to talk about burnout as well. And so burnout is a little different than compassion fatigue because it builds slowly. Burnout can be the result of prolonged stress. So when rest and recovery never quite catch up with what's being asked of us, this is when we start experiencing burnout. And so with that definition, how many of you can relate and understand or maybe have experienced burnout? And it might not even be in this existing current job that you're in. It might have been in a past job, right? How many of you have experienced burnout, or maybe have witnessed like a family member or a sibling or a good friend experience burnout? Yes. Something I feel there's a lot. So this prolonged stress. And earlier this morning, I have a good friend that lives, that works here on the res with the tribe, with the Navajo tribe. And there's a lot of transition and a lot of things going on internally within the tribe. And she shares that with me, like, I'm feeling so stressed, like this is really hard. I don't have a good leader. So she's giving me some examples. And her employees or her team is feeling it as well. And so I check in with her just to see, like, hey, how's work going? How has it been this week? And so this morning she texted me and she said one of her team members was like, he's resigning, he's quitting because he can't stand what he's constantly having to deal with, right? And so he's a perfect example of burnout. Like stress of the work was too much, and a lot of it was internal. He loved the work, but it was internal stress with the team, with the leadership, that this was it. I gotta go, right? And so he couldn't keep up with what was happening, and he couldn't rest and recover, right? So some of these things, like the fatigue and the burnout, are normal responses to us kind of being at that level of giving in these organizations or healing roles or community-based roles. So this is a good way to understand the difference, right? And then now we can apply it to ourselves. Like, am I feeling compassion fatigue right now? Or am I like leaning into burnout, right? And this is that self-evaluation. We need to know where we are at on the scale. And so there's just a quick poll, and I want you to answer in the chat here to answer, how often do you feel emotionally drained after helping others? Do you feel emotionally drained? And so the responses here, 1, you can type 1 is never, 2 is sometimes, 3 is often, 4 is always. And no judgment here. Like, this is just you sharing, right? We're in a safe space to share. So how often do you feel emotionally drained after helping others? Right? And so many of us are sometimes, often, right? And it looks like the majority is sometimes and often coming in, right? And this is a good way to like take that quick poll and find out where we're at, right? It's a level of awareness. I always, this is one of my things that I always say when we're doing work on ourselves. The first step is that awareness. So we have to be aware of where we are in this space. Like, am I feeling emotionally drained when I'm working with clients, or after I'm done with the day at work? Or am I feeling emotionally drained when I'm to like deal with the family reunion, or the family that's coming together for the holidays, right? And this is just doing that honest assessment so that I become aware of, where's my scale right now, right? Where am I at? So I appreciate the honesty. And so your here is tapping into that level of awareness, right? And with every group that I've asked this question to, whether it was a facilitated training or in a Zoom training webinar, this comes up, right? Many of us feel emotionally drained a lot of time, right? And so this tells us that it's not a personal weakness of ours. It's a question of how much we put into the work that we're doing. So you guys are doing the hard stuff out there in community, and sometimes we get tired, right? We burn out a little bit. We get tired, emotionally fatigued. So I want to take it one next level too here. So I want you to put this in the chat, a word or a little phrase that describes how burnout or compassion fatigue has shown up for you in particular. So maybe it's, I was tired, right? Or maybe everything felt heavy. Maybe it's numbness. I just numbed myself from all of that. Maybe I felt disconnected. Maybe I was overwhelmed or overextended. What's one word that describes that burnout that maybe you've experienced, or that compassion fatigue that you can relate to? Type that in the chat. Disassociate, overwhelmed, stressed, drained, right? I notice I carry a lot of my tension or stress in my jaw and my neck and my shoulders. Usually starts in my neck and my shoulders, and then it migrates up to my jaw, and I get like these tension headaches. So that's when I know like something's heavy on me, something's stressing me out. And so I can see the physical signs, and I need to do something to kind of alleviate that. weary, exhausting, defeated, physically tense, be judgmental sometimes, stressed, right? Definitely exhausting. So look at all these words coming through. This is our shared experience of caring deeply and putting all we can into our personal life or our work life, right? And so what we'll do is talk about ways and look at different ways to replenish that energy, right? To replenish and offset, mitigate some of these symptoms, some of these things that are showing up when we have compassion fatigue and we're going into burnout, right? So these are going to be your signals. So take note of what you indicated here. That was that level of awareness. I know maybe I feel exhausted. I know I feel physically tense. I know I start feeling that right? I start feeling judgmental. Those are all symptoms leading in. They're your signs, your signals. And so we're going to take a deeper look at that, how to recognize these signs before we get to that breaking point. Thank you for and I love, like, some of these are like metaphors, even like the weight pulling you, right? Or that heaviness. All of those things are good metaphors to describe like how this can feel in our bodies, right? And so let's go into the next slide. So now this is really recognizing the signs and progression. So for you, what you put in the chat is one of the signs that you know when you're feeling compassion fatigue. You know how it shows up in your body. And a lot of it was very physical kind of signs, right? And so now that we've named burnout and compassion fatigue, we want to talk about like how they show up. Burnout rarely happens overnight, right? It builds over time. And so one of the key things leaning into awareness is that if we can recognize it early, we can take steps to restore balance before it becomes too heavy, right? So let's look through some of the common signs and the different stages that are going to lead up to burnout. And so on the slide, you'll see like some of the early signs might look like taking on other people's pain or problems. And I want to give a little bit of context to this. So if you're very empathetic, or you can classify yourself as an empath, and maybe you are very compassionate and sympathetic, if we don't know how to separate from taking people's emotions and feelings and everything that they're carrying, and we take it on, this is gonna give us some problems, right? We need to learn how to kind of separate from that. So if you are a self-identified empath, maybe you've learned how to do this, or maybe you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't be in busy, crowded areas because I feel everybody's energy and it drains me, right? And so this can be something that could be happening in your your place of employment, or maybe it's at home, right? So taking on other people's pain or problems. And then maybe feeling guilty when you rest or say no. This is a really common one. And so when you're at work, maybe it's like, hey, Linnell, can you type up this report? And maybe I have a million things on my plate. Partly, maybe I'm a people pleaser, and partly I'm a yes person, and I want to be a team member that's always helpful. And so I'm like, I have 10 million things on my plate right now, but okay, I can go ahead and type up that report for you, right? And so it feels guilty to say, you know what, I have like 20 things that are due by the end of the day. Can this wait until tomorrow? Or do you think this can be something that I tackle later in the week, because I really need to finish these things up, right? So maybe you feel that guilt when you want to rest or say no to things. You may have difficulties setting boundaries, right? So being that yes person, or always wanting to people please, maybe this is where I need to shore up some boundaries, because I'm letting things like come to my plate when I have a million things already, and I'm constantly adding to it because I have no boundaries to to push back on, right? And then looking at the mid-stage signs, and this might include constant tiredness or irritability. So it's kind of moving forward a little more, right? So this is kind of that is showing up in the physical way. So I'm tired, I'm irritable. Maybe I do some emotional numbing or detach from the situation. Maybe this is where I disassociate. So feeling like you have nothing left to give, right? And then maybe you're losing motivation or joy in helping others, right? Maybe it doesn't feel as fulfilling. Maybe it's not as enjoyable to do the work that you're doing. And you think back like, geez, when I first started at this organization, I loved the mission. I was so excited. And I was excited to help people and do this work. And then maybe 5-10 years later, you're feeling like, this doesn't give me that same high. This doesn't feel as joyful anymore, right? So then it affects the motivation within the job. And then thinking about the advanced signs, this is where we might notice a lot of those obvious physical symptoms, right? So maybe I'm getting headaches. Maybe I'm feeling physically exhausted. Maybe I have pain. I have pain in my legs are hurting, my arms, I'm getting like a tight neck. Maybe I start withdrawing from my community work and my family. And then the last one there is I'm really starting to question my purpose or ability to help within this job, right? And so thinking about those things, and this is not an all-inclusive list. These are some of the things that can show up for us. And many of you kind of popped into the chat to where you had listed things that show up when I notice burnout, when I notice fatigue, right? Compassion fatigue. So I'm curious if you can take a moment to pause and reflect and think about what's one early sign you can notice when you're approaching burnout. So think about that in your job, or maybe it was a previous job. So maybe it was feeling, or maybe it was like I stopped returning phone calls. And it's so funny because my mom and I were just having this conversation. She calls the clinic, and there's a certain clinic in particular here on the res that never returns phone calls. And so this, as I was like preparing and reflecting on my notes and whatnot, I was thinking like, I wonder if that person is just like, I'm done. I don't really care. I'm not going to return any phone calls because I'm just so tired of my job. Maybe they're at the burnout phase, right? Maybe you start skipping meals, or you start to feel irritable or disconnected, right? And so, yeah, emails start feeling like a Herculean task, right? Like replying to people like, oh my God, my box is so flooded. Like I feel like, do I really need to reply to that email? Lack of patience, that's a really common one. And unfortunately, I see this sometimes in healthcare. And I use my mom as an example because I go to a lot of her appointments. And then when she goes by herself, she reports back to me. And she was, I was talking to this patient advocate, and my mom's hard of hearing. She lost one of her hearing aids, which makes it even harder. And so she kept asking, like, can you repeat that? Can you repeat? And she said she noticed this look on the person's face as annoyed. She classified it as annoyed. And my mom was like, she was, I can't help that. I can't hear. Like, it's just kind of where I'm at right now. And so I was thinking about that as well. Like, that lady is not very patient with the elders anymore for whatever reason. So maybe she's kind of hitting that burnout phase, right? Maybe there's other things impacted her that one day, right? No recognition for hard work. Yep. That's morale kind of squash right there. Lack of sleep, trying to figure out things when you should be sleeping. Tasks feel like mountains, so take shortcuts, pass them off, delegate, ignore them. I just start feeling stressed and always say I need to start saying no to some things, right? And so these are signs that you're approaching burnout. And so it's good. Like I said, it's the awareness part of it. So once you can recognize them, the earlier the better. And it's really not about shame. These are normal, we're humans, and normal natural feelings that can come up in these instances. And so the awareness is giving us a choice. So being aware of how this is kind of leaning into burnout, it gives us a choice to slow down, to reach out and maybe start implementing certain strategies and give us an opportunity to restore before we hit that empty tank, right? Before we hit that where we have nothing left to give. So this is an important piece here. Like I said, the awareness is the first step when we're going into this. And that's going to be so helpful as we're applying strategies. One of the things I like here is something, and this is something that you can use yourself if you want to like Google a medicine wheel. This is, I just thought was kind of cool. Or if you want me to send you the PDF of this, it's just a reminder to take a moment to do that self-check. And what I personally like to do is have this printed. And I have like a little magnetic board, a cork board on my, just above my computer at home. And I have this up there. And so it's that constant reminder that I have to do this check-in with myself if I feel or sense one of those symptoms coming up for me, right? Maybe I'm feeling no patience, or it's like, I don't even want to get those emails. Let me just close out for the day. Or maybe it's procrastination, right? I just don't want to deal with all of this because I'm just feeling totally unmotivated. So knowing the signs, the symptoms, do a really quick self-check. So with this medicine wheel, it leans into tradition and culture. It reminds us that true wellness is circular. And it's not only about our physical health, but also about our mind, body, spirit, and emotion, all working together to create that balance. And so when we have one area that's maybe being neglected or not given a lot of time and attention, then the whole wheel starts to be impacted in different ways, right? And so we want to be intentional and mindful as much as possible to create that balance by nurturing to all four aspects as we navigate and as we navigate personal life, right? And so we want to think about this. So this one, this medicine wheel has the body in the white section, the mind in the yellow, the emotional in the red, and the spiritual in the black. And so when you look at this and think about it, which part of this wheel feels really strong right now? What do you feel strong in? And it might be like on a scale of 1 to 10, I feel like a 10 plus, or I feel strong because I'm in a 6, right? So your level of strength in these areas can vary, right? But what part of this wheel feels strong for you right now? And then think about, well, let's answer that first question. What feels strong right now in this wheel? Is it my mind, my body, my spirit, my emotional state? And type that in the chat. Which one feels strong for you right now? For me personally, I probably feel like I'd like to think my body, it's not where I want it. I feel like I need a little more strength in that, but it's serving its purpose. And I'm very thankful for that, right? I'm healthy. I'm able-bodied. So I feel like my body is doing what it needs for me. That feels good. Right at this moment, that's what I would say. And so many of you have like your spirit, your body, strong mind, spirit, mind, yes. So different areas feel really good right now, right? They're feeling strong. And then on the flip side of that, which area needs care? What do you think needs care right now? What area? Type that in. And I think, Wendell, you said the need is the body, right? That's where we need some time and attention. The body, mind, body. Yeah. Spirit needs care. Definitely. And so this is a really easy tool to just do that check-in, right? To find out what part needs a little more attention or care. And so you've all identified what that looks like. And so this can be like kind of that homework, home play moving forward is once we're done with the session, I ask of you to take some time to just jot down some reflections on what that looks like, the area that is calling for more attention, whether it's your mind, your body, the emotional aspect, or the spiritual aspect. Just take some time, a couple of moments to journal and think about that, right? What does that look like? What feels like is lacking in that little mindful section? What's lacking in the emotional aspect? What am I missing as far as like my spirit section? What am I missing as far as the body section? And so just kind of get a little bit of clarity of how you're feeling in each of these areas and what needs that time and attention and what does that mean for you, right? This is leaning into like really identifying and becoming aware of what that looks like. So I appreciate that you're all putting information into the chat. And so that this medicine wheel is really teaching us that we can't just push through that imbalance. We have to be mindful to tend and nurture in every direction. So for every aspect, we have to put in the effort for this, right? And so when one side needs a little more care, the other aspects of that medicine wheel can bring it back into harmony, right? And balance. So that we're constantly working towards the balance. We're not always going to be 100% balance, but once we become aware of those symptoms and what's kind of building for us, then we can do these check-ins like, what do we need right now? And so for me, I'm a big one on self-care. And it still takes a lot of practice to definitely get into this space of applying it. But I truly believe in self-care. And one of the best quotes that I ever heard, they just always carry with me, is that I used to feel like self-care was self-indulgent. It felt like I was in too much time for myself when there's so much going on that needs to be tended to. And the quote that I heard was that self-care is not selfish, it's self-preservation. And so I've always held on to that, thinking that whenever it feels like, oh, like self-care for me might be just taking a walk. Maybe it's going to the gym. Maybe it's doing some meditation. Maybe it's going shopping. Whatever that looks like. I used to think that taking time for myself felt selfish. But it was a way of me recharging. It was a way of me tending to one of these areas, right? And so when you think about it as self-preservation, that gives us an opportunity for us to be closer to 100%, more in balance, and then I can show up and do more for my community, for my team at work, for my organization, right? So the more balance we have in our life, the more we can do without pulling from these different areas and reducing it, right? So the ultimate goal is to try and create that balance for ourselves and what it looks like, right? Okay, let me just look at the chat real quick. Okay, cool. I don't think we have anything new in there. So let's go into this next slide. And so here is giving an opportunity to think about the heart of service, remembering your why, right? So we've talked a lot about burnout, compassion fatigue, kind of what our triggers are or what our symptoms are. And so tying it back to like the work that we're doing. So as people that work in tribal communities, we often like really put so much into others that we forget why we began this work, right? And this may be the same thing within family. Like we put so much into family that we forget like why we began all of this, right? And so that's the why, that's the heart of the work that we're doing. It's what sustains us when the work feels heavy. So when we serve communities, we're carrying like all of those generations of care forward, right? We're carrying that within us. And so when we think about like our grandparents, our parents, our mentors, our elders in the community all taught us that this service is not just a job, it's a responsibility, right? It's a way of honoring one another and really being mindful of that. So we want to always remember the why, because this is going to give us that purpose, and it's going to be that medicine that we need to reconnect when we feel lost or exhausted, right? And so what I'd like for you to do, and Brooke, let me know if this is possible, because I was able to do it the last time we didn't talk about it, but if we're able to create like a little breakout room, if that's possible. If not, we can pivot. But I'd like for like pairs of people go into breakout rooms and talk about these two questions. Why do you serve your community? And how does your why give you strength when that work feels heavy? And you might have to type in, okay, perfect. I said, thank you. You can do that. So if you're like loosely listening, hopefully you can come back to the webinar, because we're going to put you in pairs. And actually, I think it'd be, Sarah, Brooke, if possible, go ahead and in triads, threes, just in case somebody is not available to jump in, and we'll have a backup person in a room. So let's do triads. And give them about 5 minutes, and we'll come back, and I'd love to hear from some of you your reflections of what you talked about. So if you want to take a picture of the slide, why do you serve your community? And how does your why give you strength? Okay, and feel free to let folks know when you're ready to whoosh them away. And then, like I said earlier, if you're like loosely listening or multitasking, if you can come back to this session, that'd be great.
All right, folks, the breakout rooms are created. Folks, you will have to accept the invitation to enter it. So I see most of you have already been pulled into your rooms. If any of you were in a room just kind of solo, because maybe it didn't, the other two people you would have been assigned to did not accept, just let me know and I'll try to fix that.
Thank you, Brooke. All right, I think everyone should be back from that short breakout. I'm curious, like how did it feel to speak your why to another person? Type that in the chat. Like, what was it like to hear your why out loud? Or even to hear someone else's why? It was really quick, yeah. It's like my why is a lot longer than a 5-minute timer, right? Yeah, sometimes it's nice to just say it out loud and why we do the good work. Yeah. Common ground, why you appreciate the connection. Feel like I'm not alone, right? Wonderful. Nice to share and listen. Yeah, it sounded purposeful. It was nice to hear the common purpose, right? Yeah. And sometimes we need to do that. Like, what is the why of what I'm doing in community? And I feel like for me, Creator put me in the work of like Native CDFIs, Native nonprofits, like working in that space, and then giving me different skill sets to kind of navigate that and really support and build people within the organizations, right? Executive leadership, things like that. So I feel like my why was very intentionally carved out for me. And once I like settled down enough to be mindful of it, then it was like, oh, this is where I'm going, right? I was able to enjoy it a lot more. And so reflecting on the why is going to be really important in when we're thinking about those symptoms or we're feeling those symptoms come up. Like, what is my why and what gives me strength when the work feels heavy, right? And the why is coming back to that. Like, I'm very much community focused. I want to build my people. I have a vision for my people. And so leaning into that and articulating it can be our anchor in those situations, right? So what I'd like to do next is, and this can be like heavy for folks, this next slide, but I think it's very important for us to be aware of this, and you probably already are in many ways. But one thing that I think really impacts us working in tribal communities and working for our own people is that we have different levels of stress, different ways that trauma show up, and how we navigate and become resilient in the work that we're doing. And so when we talk about service in tribal communities, we can't separate it from our history, right? And we know a lot about the history that resulted in so many atrocities, right? And we're not going to go through all of those things, but we know that it's very much present, right? But this can also be the strength that carried us through in managing the traumas that were experienced and that we're generation strong, we're pulling forward, right? And so when we think about, I saw a couple of comments in there that like this was what we were taught, how to like be present for people and help people, right? And so this can be part of really what we embody working in community. So that service comes from that love, that responsibility, that duty. Maybe it's a cultural value, right? That we must do this. It's kind of woven into our DNA so that we have that almost innate instinct to protect, to give, to fix, to make sure our people are cared for. But what's also true in that is that we want to use that same strength that drives us to always keep going. But on the flip side, it can bring us to a point of exhaustion. So we need to take time to stop, to rest, to breathe, to give ourselves care so that we don't start wearing thin, right? And when we're constantly surrounded by other people's traumas, maybe it's housing needs, lack of housing, maybe it's grief, maybe it's addiction, poverty, loss, our own nervous systems start to absorb it, even if we think we're managing it pretty well. And so this is what they call like secondary trauma. That's what we're carrying. So it's like that emotional residue of holding other people's pain, right? And when we do that, it doesn't mean that we're weak. It means we're human. And it means that part of our healing journey as helpers in community is learning to honor both sides of that, right? Both sides that we've inherited. And so we want to be mindful of that. And for time's sake, I'm gonna skip this prompt, but it can be food for thought. What teaching from your family helps you stay grounded when things get heavy? Because sometimes we're influenced by the cultural traditional teachings, or maybe we have the religious, the organized religion kind of teaching, or maybe it's just something that happened within our community, our family. So think about that. What teaching from your family helps you stay grounded when things get heavy? For me, one thing I really love and appreciate is taking that moment to like burn cedar and pray in the mornings. That really settles like so much in my mind and heart, and then it brings a level of comfort. So that's what I carry forward in the work that I do when I'm feeling heavy around work or personal life. Okay, the power of prayer. Yes, so many of you will have different tools for access whatever feels good for you. This is an experiential mapping my energy. And this gives you an opportunity to reflect on when your energy feels full and when it feels drained, right? So we're leaning into that awareness, understanding ourselves. We're going to understand those patterns that help us restore balance. So this is an activity that you can do maybe with your partner, maybe with your children, maybe it's with a coworker. So I encourage you to apply this in the next maybe week or so, to do this, map your energy and talk with one of your team members, or like I said, your spouse, anyone that you can, and talk about when you feel most full, your energy feels like peak, optimal, right? And when do you feel most drained? Like when does that happen? And when your energy level is like you're running on low, getting close to empty. So we're not going to do this breakout because I want to be mindful of time here, but I encourage you to apply this and think about how that conversation felt, right? As you were talking about, when my energy is full, I feel like this. And when my energy is low, I feel like this. And I wanted to make sure I got to this slide today too, because this is going to give you some of those practical strategies that you can apply, and how to create that balance in your personal life and also your work life, right? Because when we think about our well-being, it's not necessarily just an individual responsibility. It's something that we're going to co-create within our teams, our organizations, and our communities. And trust me, I know that in some organizations, it's harder to do that because there may be a certain culture that's already been established within that organization. And to shift into being mindful of our well-being may be a larger task than others, but that's why we have those individual practices too. So maybe we don't have a role of like shifting an organization's culture and how they operate and how they address well-being, but we can always do the work on ourselves, right? And so we want to be mindful of like how we support wellness, and then what are the benefits to that, right? What are the benefits when I'm feeling optimal? what is the benefit to my clients, to my team members, and then with our leadership, right? And so we want to think about that. What is something that we could shift in a small way to make our workplaces more sustainable in that well-being space, right? So when we look at this little bit here, individual practices, things that we can do for ourselves that we can apply and adapt. Taking short breaks or walking outside, and that can be super meaningful. Just getting away from the computer, stepping away, recharging, getting some fresh air, and taking a short walk. It doesn't take a lot of time. And then this is where we can like practice some of that groundedness, the mindfulness, right? We can be intentional about boundaries around after hours work. And sometimes some of us, the work that part of it is our personality, but part of it is the demand of the work, right? And sometimes we have to take things home. But if we create boundaries that really support that, hey, I'm 100% present from 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever your working hours are. But my boundary is that once I leave work, I'm going to be 100% in family mode or 100% me time, whatever that is, but I'll come back fresh, recharged, and I'm going to put in 100% again tomorrow, right? And having a boundary around that, if that's important to you, is learning how to articulate with your team, right? And then using breathing or grounding tools between clients. So if you're working with folks back to back to back, you may need to recharge and have a practice to ground so that you're showing up 100% for that next client. That might be breath work. That might be a short meditation. It might be walking out and just washing your hands, using water as that cleansing in between clients, right? So these are certain things that you can do. And then taking personal days or using your cultural leave, right? And this is time that you've earned, right? To take that time for yourself to do some recharging and stepping away from work so that you can still show up and be 100% for your clients and really being 100% for that why. Scheduling time for reflection or journaling. This can be helpful in between clients even as well, like just jotting things down. What came up for you? How were you feeling? Were you activated? Were you triggered? What are some things that you want to tend to after your work hours, right? And then seeking peer support or mentorship. Sometimes a coach can be really helpful in this space, a trusted advisor, a mentor, somebody that you can talk through things that showed up in the workplace that you can do some unpacking. And then turning off notifications after work hours. I had a former employee who had to do this. She said, work is just so much. And she caught herself checking her email on her phone after work hours into the evening. And she finally became very aware of it and said, you know what? I need to stop doing this. Like my time needs to be non-work time. And so she created, I think she had an iPhone, so she created a focus filter that wasn't going to show her any of the notifications from emails from work. And she was honoring herself and what was important to her by creating that boundary and not doing work after hours, right? And so sometimes that might feel uncomfortable or hard, or like my boss said, I have to be 24/7 and respond to emails. So this is where we need to practice some of those creation of boundaries with whatever is reasonable within your workplace, right? And then shifting over to the workplace practices. So this is something that can be embodied in the workplace, within your team, your department, really leaning into having those well-being check-ins or circle opportunities, openings where you're checking in with your team. Like, how are we feeling today? And they don't have to be like just kind of boring check-ins. You can make this interactive and fun, right? And once it starts happening, it becomes part of the normal activity within the organization. So people have that expectation. So it can't just be a one and done, oh, I'm going to check in next Monday, and then it never happens again, right? So we need to be intentional about honoring these well-being spaces we're creating. And then maybe like even a no meetings Friday, right? And having that protected focus time. Or maybe it's going to be on Thursday where we can do other work, or kind of maybe do some well-being practices during those no meeting time spaces. Co-creating and honoring shared agreements on communication and response time, what's reasonable, right? So how do we communicate? What does that look like? Are emails okay? Do we want to do check-ins once a week? Do we want to do little huddles once a day? What makes the most sense for the team so we can check in with one another work-wise, but also on that well-being space? Leadership modeling, rest and vulnerability. So this is where leaders can embody and create a culture within an organization that your well-being is important, because when you're optimal as a team member, then you feed into the organization an optimal energy, right? So we're showing up really helpful for our clients, but we're also showing up for our team. And this has to be modeled within an organization from leadership on through. And then recognizing and celebrating small wins together. So like having that, I think somebody had commented like no recognition for hard work being done. This is going to be important, right? So giving kudos, giving props, like celebrating, like, all right, team, we got our board report in on time. So this is the time we celebrate, or just giving a high five to Linnell. She was able to do a training and a webinar with tech issues. So good job. So sometimes it's those little things, and the important thing is that they're true and that you actually mean it, right? And so it's not those fake props, but like, man, I'm so glad that webinar went out even though you had tech issues, right? So actually really being joyful about these things. Peerless patterns or buddy systems. So this can be where you're actually paired up with somebody, or you have that thought partner to kind of just do those check-ins. That can be really helpful as well. And allowing flexible schedules when possible. I know people, some organizations give time off, like just, hey, I need a mental health day, or giving you an extended lunch, or give you time to go work out. So building those practices into an organization can be really meaningful and helpful to building the wellness of your team. So there's some things that you can do individually and some things that you can incorporate as a workplace practice. Okay, so I'm being mindful of the time here. I know we're getting close to time, and we had a little bit of tech issue that took some time this morning, but we'll be good. And so I want you to just take some time after the session, home play. I call it a home play because we don't like homework, and we don't want to take work hours. So we want to take some time to get playful with getting curious in these spaces. So taking that same medicine wheel with those different things in it, we want to take some time to restore balance in the mind, body, spirit, and emotional area. So you want to talk again about thinking about what drains your energy or spirit, and then what restores that, right? And so you want to have this as a continuous practice. So whether you print that medicine wheel and put it on your computer, or maybe it's going to be the screensaver on your phone, have that as that reminder, like, hey, I need to do a check-in with myself. How am I feeling today? What do I need to restore? What area is feeling that needs some attention? So this is a practice that you can carry forward that takes very little time. And then, so this is the important one, because I always like to have some sort of call to action, something that you're going to commit to make that one small adjustment or shift, right? Because we identified a lot of things in the chat for ourselves personally in helping cultivate and creating that balance. So we want to be mindful about making that one small intentional shift or step towards that. And just knowing that this small shift, as small as that step may seem or sound, it's going to create momentum for long-term change. So I want you to think about this. Think about that question. What's one small shift you will make this week to restore balance for yourself? So after today's conversation, what's going to be that one small shift that you're going to make towards restoring balance? So maybe it's going to be, hey, I'm going to learn how to say no with kindness, or I'm going to move into more humor and laughter in my work, or maybe being more mindful and meditate and pray. It's body movement, right? I want to go to the gym. I want to go take a walk. So just think about that one small shift that you can make today. And I'm going to encourage you to drop it in the chat. Make it realistic and meaningful, something that'll help you stay grounded, right? And so this is going to be your commitment that you're putting out into the universe, and that commitment that you're putting out, all for us to see, and most importantly, for you to honor, right? And walking, getting sun, get up from my desk and move my body more. Yeah, being mindful about your body, right? So put that in the chat. I want to see what you all are committing and being intentional about. And this healing and this work doesn't take a big, huge overhaul. It's just taking that one steady step forward, right? Maybe it's just going to take more rest. Maybe it's turning my notifications off after 5, right? So think about that walking. So a lot of this is, it sounds like body inputs coming in. Breathe and get up some more, right? Maybe it's drinking more water. Maybe it's creating a boundary. Maybe it's less social media, right? Less scrolling, doom scrolling. So I love this. I love seeing that. It's being very intentional with what you're wanting to do, because these small steps are going to be sustainable and it's going to keep you moving forward. All righty. So with that, we are at time. So I want to stop here. They do share the recording and the slides. So there's a couple of additional slides that I didn't get to, but we kind of put the cherry on the dessert here with this content. So that one small shift moving forward. But I want to extend my gratitude and appreciation for all of you showing up and doing some work and reflection on yourselves, and making this call to action, this intentional step moving forward. So I want to give you guys so much positive energy, and enjoy your time this week, whatever time you give to spend with family, food, yourself. Enjoy it. Take a moment and just know that I'm sending you lots of positive energy as well. So I'll turn it back over to Brooke. Thank you all.
Yay! Thank you so much for that amazing webinar, Linnell. I think perfect, nice ending for the holiday week for everybody. Sorry guys, trying to take the slides. There we go. So I encourage you guys to look through those last few slides that she had. The link to the slides is in your chat. And then I've also put a link to the webinar feedback survey in the chat for you. It takes about 2 to 3 minutes to complete, and it is anonymous. You do not have to worry about your name or your email or anything like that being connected to it. It just lets us know at the Native Learning Center what's working and what we can improve upon. And we do share the feedback with our instructors, so it helps everybody all around. We hope you can join us for our next webinar. That is going to be next week on Tuesday. We are going to be closed Thursday and Friday this week. The Native Learning Center will be. So that webinar is going to be on lower income housing tax credits compliance 101. Your instructor will be Crystal Banks-Mann, who is with Travoy. Again, that's next week on Tuesday, December 2nd. And then you can access this as well as our other recorded webinars on our YouTube channel now. There's a whole playlist called the Cathedra Webinar Archive. So we encourage you to check that out. Please also check out our upcoming training events. We post about them on our social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And if any podcast fans are in the webinar, we have our own podcast, the Hope a Thing, a Native American podcast. You can listen to that wherever you listen to your podcasts. Otherwise, I don't want to keep y'all any longer. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I think it's really amazing that even on such a stressful week, y'all have come to a webinar that's just going to help you for yourself. I am going to go ahead and turn the recording off, but I have put that webinar feedback survey link for you in the chat once more.